Hi everyone, Megan here from Romance by the Book.
Hello.
Marielle is here, and the lovely Milla Vane, aka Mel Jean Brooke, is here with us. We read her amazing book, A Heart of Blood and Ashes, for January's Book of the Month. And it was a reread for both Marielle and I, but we loved it so much still this time. And we have so many questions to ask you. So we're so happy that you're here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me so much. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Sorry.
We have invited you twice, so.
Yeah. So we're so thrilled to have her here today, and for you guys to see this on Saturday when she does her takeover of our page. So I think I'll just dig in and say the first question that really came to me was, how long has this series been marinating in your brain? Because I know that Night Shift came out back in 2014,
right,
and had the Beast of Blackmore, of course, in it, which is like a prequel, I guess, and it's in the same world. So how long has this been around in your brain?
I think it was around 2010 when I first started kind of conceiving
wow.
of the idea. I knew that this was kind of like when self-publishing really first started taking off. And so I thought, well, it might be really fun to kind of break away from the Mel Jean Brooke stuff and write something that's darker and barbarian romance, because I just love the barbarian fantasy thing. So I wrote this entire outline for this, like a trilogy. And then I kind of put it away a little bit because I was, struggling on deadlines and doing some other things. And then it was, yeah, it was about 2012 when I went to my editor and I was like, I've got this barbarian series kind of percolating in my brain. And she said, let's look at it. And that was why we had the Night Shift anthology come out. And she was like, let's give it a go. Let's see how it works. And then I just had this writing block for like 4 years after that. And so, I mean, that was like, I was working on it bit by bit. It was 2016 when I really started writing what became A Heart of Blood and Ashes. And so it was about 4 years that I was working on that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess that explains somewhat like how big the world feels. Like, I mean, it feels like there's history and there's future, and that the world it feels complete. And I know that that's when authors, you show us like enough detail that it feels like everything is all the way hashed out. But it is interesting that to read that book, it feels like there's a lot of world there and a lot of history and like mythology and all kinds of things that seem like they probably would take time to noodle out.
Right, because I wasn't always like writing it, like actually like physically writing the pages or writing the story, but it was always like in the back of my head, how is this going to work? What's going to make it more interesting? How, what can I add to the mythology and what can I add to the background of the world? And so it really was there was there was like a long time and a lot of notebooks of just like ideas, filling it up, and like, the different cultures and stuff we might go around and see.
Oh, and we were reading, and I may be stealing Megan's question, maybe, but you, one aspect of, I guess, the Parsathians' culture is that they don't lie, right? That they always tell the truth. They don't leave things unsaid unless it's something that's best left unsaid. And I remember reading this, and Megan and I talked about it. I was like, I feel like this could cause some problems for me. Like, how do you know if it's the best left unsaid? Also, like, what if you say the thing and then it's like, oh.
And then you realize later that you probably shouldn't have said it, which of course happens to Maddek more than once.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess that kind of goes along with my question too, which is basically like, what prompted that for his particular culture? Was he the character first and you knew that he was going to be forthright and that leaked out into his culture, or was it the opposite?
Actually, that was one of the last things that I added in. The very first for that particular story. Actually, this particular story. It wasn't even like in the original trilogy that I had sketched out. It was kind of a short story as I was writing The Kraken King. I just had like this idea where this guy was going to take revenge on a family, and he meets the heroine, and she kills her brother, and then says, let's do this together. And so that was like the beginning of the idea. And so I always knew that he wasn't going to trust her very much, and that was going to be a real like problem and conflict between them. But the part where he actually has like, they don't like lie at all, that was like one of the very last things I added in. And in fact, I think I started writing the first chapters, and that wasn't actually an aspect. I mean, the honesty was an aspect, but it wasn't like set in stone like that. And then I thought, this is going to be so much more interesting as a culture. And then the reason behind it, like it kind of came out in that song that they have in the middle. It was like a song.
Right.
I wrote a song. Whatever it was that I wrote. Actually, the funny story about that is I spent a long time trying to like make it rhyme and like do the meter correctly. And I was like, you know what? This is like a pretend translation to English anyway. I was like, screw it. I like, did the syllables a little bit, but that was it. And but yeah, so then I was like, well, then I have to find a reason for it. And so I did put that kind of background in, where the tribes come together and the only way they trust each other is they don't lie at all. So it was like a kind of a reverse world building thing there, where I had this aspect of this character that I thought, this is going to increase the conflict so much if he doesn't trust her at all and he thinks that she's lying, and that is like one of the worst things possible to do. And then, to really set it in concrete as far as his culture goes. It's not just he's like, don't ever lie, because I mean, everybody lies, right? I mean, who doesn't? It's more like, it has to be like this thing that's really, really like important to him, so that it's not just like, I mean, we see that all the time, where there's like world building aspects that we say, you can't cross this, it'll be, and then they cross it and there's nothing that happens, but this is like something that like really would, he would be dishonored seriously by lying, or by accepting someone who lied. So
I thought it was interesting too, the way that he kind of set himself up in the beginning, because he made it so she couldn't tell him everything, but then he couldn't trust her because he didn't know all the things. And it's like,
right.
Well, it took him a really long time to get around that. And I was like, Milla Vane, what are you doing to this guy? He's already kind of grumpy. And now,
look, I saw somebody on Twitter. No, wait, it was, anyway, somewhere it was like, my whole purpose in life is to torture heroes. And I think that's true. I mean, I really do. I
feel like Sarah McLean says that a lot. She's like, I want to suffer.
I mean, it's not that I like, hate men. It's just that I want the heroes of these stories to like pay. I don't know what they're paying for, but in this case, it's just like, yeah, you have someone who's so stubborn, and he, in his rage and grief, he sets these vows that he can't back off from. And because of that, he is going to go through so much pain and, emotional agony later. Yeah. So, I mean, it's always fun because, that's the whole thing is it's not necessarily that all the outside grief that's going to come in and hurt him. It's what he does to himself. And that's so delicious. So delicious.
Yeah. Well, they were such a good pair too, because as vengeful as he was, she matched him 100%. And she was more sneaky and I think as a politician, she was more astute that way. He was just like, I'm gonna wring your neck right now. And she would be like, no, let's play the long game. But in the end, he brings her like somebody's head and somebody's heart, and she's like, oh honey, we should get married right now. And it's like, I was like, this might not work for every heroine.
It was perfect for her though. In fact, she's the one who asked for the heart, if I remember correctly.
No, I mean, she was so much fun. I mean, I don't think it would be like wrong to say that she's one of my favorite heroines I've ever written. No. And I love so many of my heroines. I'm a really heroine-centric writer. I mean, they always come first. And so yeah, I really enjoyed writing someone who was that manipulative and that smart, and who was willing, and who knew she wasn't going to beat anybody up with a sword. I mean, that's why she has Maddek, you know. I mean, that's what she needs him for.
Right.
And she knows it, you know, and he doesn't know it yet because he thinks he's, you know, savvy or whatever. But I mean, he's savvy in some ways, but in other ways he's just way out of his league when it comes to her. And so yeah, I mean, that's fun. I
loved each like creeping realization he had along the way. Every time she did something or taught him something, and he was like, "Oh God, like, how did I not know that I didn't know that?" kind of, and it was always great.
He had to apologize so much.
I will give you that moment when part of his honesty policy being that he did admit when he was wrong and apologize, which is more than a lot of people can say. So.
Well, yeah, I think that was really important that he apologized. I'm sorry, I just cut you off. But
no,
yeah,
go ahead.
That was one of the things I deliberately put in was I knew that he was going to be a difficult character for readers to take. I mean, he just grabs onto his rage and his grief, and he just goes with it. And so I knew that if he held on to that all the way, that, I mean, I would like be losing readers like crazy, and I wouldn't blame him anyway, because I would be like, I mean, that's like the type of hero that you might get in like a 1980s, 1970s romance novel. But he's not that one. He's going to, when he realizes that he's wrong, he's going to apologize, or he's going to change what he's doing wrong. And I think that's the only way to kind of tolerate that kind of overbearing hero, because otherwise it's just abusive, you know. And I know it kind of crept onto that a couple of times. But, you know, even when you go that far toward that type of behavior, there always has to be the back off before crossing a line. And of course, for some readers, of course it crosses a line. I mean, it's not going to be the same for everyone, but that was something I was really conscious of, is that when he realizes that he's done something wrong, he needs to apologize for it.
Also, I mean, I think for me, the one that I was like, oh, this is sad, was when he realized that she couldn't use her knee, that she couldn't run, that she, you know, when they're like, oh, she came down the stairs on her butt, and he's like, why didn't anyone catch her? And they're like, no, she like scooted herself down. And I think, well, as I was reading, I'm like, he's like flashing back to every time that she like tripped or was unsteady, and is like, how did I not, like, he realizes that he's not asking the right questions. Right. He's waiting for her to just divulge things, but they don't trust each other yet, so he needs to ask. And I think from that point forward, he starts to kind of pay attention to her. Sorry, that's my dog. He tries to start paying attention to her in a way that's different, I think, than what he had done in the past. So then it's like, oh, she breathes like this when it hurts, and I felt like that kind of, even though he was gruff with her, he still took such care to like pay attention to her, that for me, that kind of like veered away from him being too much, too overbearing.
Right. And I, you know, that for me, that was the turning point too, where the tongue pulling is so like right up to that line. I mean, when I was writing, I was like, do I really want to do this? But I was like, you know, some things you have to push in order to get to that point where in the next day he's just like, this was the worst thing I could have done, you know. And then he really recognizes that he needs to change the way he looks at her, even if he has those instinctive like knee-jerk reactions. Sometimes he's more conscious of how he's looking at her might be wrong. And so, and of course, you know, he still has to go a long way, because nobody just changes like that. I think that would be completely unrealistic for anybody to like be like, oh, I get it now, she's perfect. And you know, and because especially since she's still hiding stuff, because what I also love about that too is that's where she's like, fuck you. I mean, can I swear here? Yeah, sure. She's like, fuck you, I don't need this anymore. She's like, you're gonna be my sword, and I'm not gonna
worry about the rest of it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Yeah.
She was just kind of like, that's not what I need you for anyway. Like, yes,
like, that would have been nice, but now that's clearly not going to happen. So fine. Yeah.
And he's like, oh.
Yeah, he's
But
like,
I want
wait,
to.
but it's like, nope, too
Well,
late.
and I love when he's like, maybe I was trying to warn myself and not her. Whoops.
Yeah. So, do you have a question, Marielle?
We had somebody on the page I posted today and asked people if they had questions. So somebody asked if the gods and goddesses will be making more appearances in the rest of the series. And then they also wanted to know what inspired that mythology, if you had looked at like indigenous lore or Greek myths or other things.
They are going to show up more, especially Vela. I'm trying to think if I did pull anybody else. And Ronnie, of course, silver-fingered Ronnie. We'll find out more about Hanan in book 3 too, and I do pull in some more like mythological stories, and one's my favorite, and I'll wait until the book's out. But but it's the story of how dragons were first made, and when it comes out, I'll have to ask you guys whether it was worth it. But I would say that probably Greek mythology and Norse mythology are huge influences, simply because as I'm, growing up and steeped in Western culture, and that type of the way everything's, the stories that come out, the stories that I hear as a white person growing up in small town America, most of the mythology that I'm aware of is going to be like the Greek and the Norse mythology. So that kind of, of course it like informed my consciousness of when I think of a pantheon of gods, that probably formed it more than anything else. And of course, since then, I've read others, but it isn't necessarily like there's no like analog in between, Vela and Athena, although they are probably maybe close in a lot of ways, or that it was like, I had that in mind in the back of my head. But like Stronach, the snake god, isn't necessarily like Satan or anything like that. It's just I needed a corridor underneath of a mountain, so I was like, I could put a snake there, and now he's a snake god. I mean, some things are just that way. So
Cool.
That's awesome.
So I had another friend ask about how you craft your worlds in a way that makes them almost like characters themselves. How do you come about doing that? And is that something that you've always done more easily in your writing as far as your world building goes, or is that something that's come along as you've gone?
I mean, it's definitely something that like for example, when I first wrote the Guardian series as Mel Jane Brooke, my first 2 books, I mean, the world building was all there, but I think it's a lot more difficult to get into. When people read those books, they're sometimes like, there's like so much, like just the way it's written is not probably as good. So that was definitely a learning process. Sorry. But as in terms of the world building itself, I don't think that it's anything like I've necessarily like applied. I think it has always been there, like, or it's something that I've always, like, when I tell stories, I kind of build the world in my head around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a lot of it in just like I kind of think like what's fun, and that's like, I mean, it's kind of like silly in a way, but like, for example, when I was making the Iron Seas, I was like, I want zombies, and I want giant sharks, and I want like giant squid and kraken. And so I was like, how am I going to do this? And I'm like, well, I'm going to have nano agents. And then, kind of I work backward from it. I'm like, what's fun? And then how am I going to make it fit this world? So it was kind of the same thing with this world. I was like, what would be fun to have? And
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs. So I'm like, how am I going to do that? And I was like, the first thing in your head, of course, is like Jurassic Park. you know, and so what if these gods come to the earth 250 million years in the future and they kind of Jurassic Park the whole thing after it's already dead because there's been like an extinction event. And I was like, I can do so much with that because not only do they add the magic because they're gods, right? I have like all of like human evolution to pull from and all of like animal evolution and plant evolution to pull from. So I can throw in mammoths if I want to, or saber-toothed tigers, or dinosaurs, or like the Permian extinction is one of my favorite extinction events. And so I like pulled in some animals from that era and I think it's just a lot of fun. And then I can also use the magic part because why not, right? I mean, and that gives me the wiggle room to make
I
everything
mean, if
work.
you have some magic.
Right, right. Dinosaurs and people can live in the same world if there's magic. Why not? So, so I mean, oftentimes it just starts with that surface idea, like what is the fun thing to do? What am I going to write? Because I mean, you spend a lot of time with these books, and so it doesn't make sense to me to write a book that's not going to be a lot of fun. Then you can't just throw anything you want into it. And so, yeah, so it's kind of like a top-down thing. And so I start like asking why and digging down until I get to like the bottom of the world, and then I start building it up again. And by that time, I usually have like something I can really work with and build on. And some things are like you know really rudimentary when I start, like the Parsathians. I mean when I started writing Maddek, I kind of like built the Parsathian culture along with it. And with that, I already had like Silverfinger Ronnie established from an earlier novella. But you know, I used her to kind of mine the new culture and the depth of the culture through that. And so like not everything is completely established and rounded out at the beginning, but as I kind of like go locally in like a story, that's when I'll start building all the details for that and make it fit.
Cool.
It definitely feels well rounded out though, like as you're reading. And I think it's neat that that you can have different cultures that like kind of identify with one of the gods more than the others, or you know that even though they're all there, you can dig in more in a specific story. You don't have to actually know everything before the story starts. Thank goodness, because otherwise you have a beginning like Tolkien or something where you're just like
or imagine a book like that where you try to like explain everything in like I mean
this dump in the first
as it was, right?
yeah.
So
Would have been a
yeah,
lot.
it's and I think that's also the way the world works too. Like when you have somebody like, you know, somebody in a desert, like the sun god might be, you know, more important to them than say the moon god, where somebody near the ocean or who sails might be looking at the stars or the moon and it's more important. So
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's, you know, that's the way it is.
it's true. I also thought that even though the world is very like fantastical in some ways, that the relationships seemed like very relatable, at least to me. Like I think that people sometimes, like people who are family, like get under each other's skin in a way that somebody else might not, like even if they're, you know, a stranger or whatever. And you saw that in some of the characters where, you know, they are seen differently by different people in their lives, and they can be different kind of versions of themselves with different people. Maddek was so competent as a soldier, such a good son, it seemed like too. And when it came time to like take on like a new role, it seemed like he kind of chafed under that for a long time. And even though like his first, I think it was one of the people in his dragon that told him that he like had developed a habit. I wrote it down and I don't know where I put it, but they had like developed a habit of like reacting in a specific way when he was with Yvenne. Like so he
That was with
like
the
his knee-jerk reaction was always like anger when it came to her talking about his mom. And then even once he felt like he could believe what she said, he still wanted to keep the like alarm system in place, so to speak, of her asking first before she talked about it. Is that what you're talking about? And they're like,
Yeah,
part
that
of the
was when
reason that's because
Dano after their first sex scene, and so Dano, who, and I mean, that was definitely one of the important things to me too, for his dragon. Like they each brought something to him, and in her case, it was because we'd already, you know, heard about her mother and how she said it wasn't even necessarily that she's angry with her mother anymore, it's that she has that knee-jerk reaction, so she could bring her own experience to teach him. And the important thing, of course, was that he's willing to listen, which I really enjoyed writing that relationship, because I think it's not so much maybe anymore, because we see it more and more that men are not so emotionally stupid in romance, but they, so many times in romance you don't see men relying on anybody else for emotional like emotional
counsel.
smarts. Yeah, I mean, like they won't like go to, they won't ever reveal their own emotions because for whatever reason, right? Toxic reasons. I mean, they just don't, they don't want anybody to know it. And so it was important for me, because he has this dragon who are here for him to react with and to talk with and to learn from. And so they don't only guard him, but they support him. And so for them to bring in their own experiences and teach him something, which was a lot of fun. And plus I liked all their characters.
There were so many times that they asked him, like, do you need counsel? And he would be like, no, I'm fine. And sometimes they would give him the counsel anyway. Vanek especially, I feel like he would be like, maybe I'll just tell you some things though.
Yeah. They were each definitely great in their own ways and useful to him in their own ways. And that was really awesome. And I think that came out even more so as the reader when they were all talking to Vela and she was, you know, talking to each of them and, you know, telling them things. And like, that was not just their reactions to her, but also the things that she was talking about for each of them, just like really informed you about them.
Kind of their place in the group. Yeah.
So our friend Taylor wanted me to ask you, if Maddek and Yvenne were in a karaoke bar, what would they sing? I just thought that was super fun questions.
That is a good. She has great questions.
Sorry, I'm like.
That's okay. No, I know it's kind of an on the spot question, but I just, if you want, we can move on and you can percolate on that a little bit.
No, it's good. Like I know what song I'm thinking of. It's Fiona Apple, and it's the one where she did the video with Zach Galifianakis, and I just can't remember the. Sorry, I'm going through the lyrics in my head to try to find the.
Is it the old ones from her
album? It's Fiona Apple, Not About Love. I really like that one because it's like very antagonistic and she's just like, yeah. So probably something like that.
Awesome.
I like Fiona Apple. That's a good
song. So I guess I can ask you the question I always ask everyone, which is, what is your favorite trope to read?
Oh gosh, probably blackmail or enemies to lovers too.
Yeah.
Because I just love that friction and that conflict and how it just turns to like sexiness and a lot of like hate fucking. Oh, that's like so nice. And but yeah, I like blackmail too because a lot of it is the same way. It's like, you know, they start like really antagonistic and then they have to learn to work together or forgive each other. Or, you know, because I don't know, there's something so good about when one wrongs the other because then they have to pay for it and it's usually the guy, right? I mean, this is like the theme of Milla Vane. He's gonna pay for it.
Make them suffer.
But yeah, I just and also I don't necessarily like books where I like end up like ugly crying or whatever, but I love the angst, and I especially love the emotional angst of of just thinking you're going to lose everything. And so when you have those enemies to lovers or blackmail or even like marriage of convenience where you might have like unrequited love or something,
Mhm.
just that pain. Oh, it's so nice, especially when like the grovel comes, and if there is a grovel,
I love a good grovel. But it's funny,
Yeah.
I'm very weird about angst. We have a couple of friends who are like total angst toes when it comes to their reads, and I'm just not down for that life. I need to be a little bit more relaxed when I'm reading. I don't like to feel like I'm being like emotionally tortured for fiction's sake. Like, so there's a line there for me that I just can't get over with certain books. But I mean, a little suffering is good. Like they got to suffer some, and it's okay if I feel like I'm suffering with them a little bit. But like, I don't want to be, like hollowed out at the end of it.
I think for me, I think there's like definitely like different types of angst that I can tolerate. Like I love it when it's like between the characters and like one is done wrong and they are pretty sure they're going to lose the other person, or they think this person's never going to love me. If it's like angst from like adultery or like cheating or something like that, I can't do that. I can't even like handle cheating in romance. It's like
Yep.
it's like one of those things where I'm like, I can't.
That's my
like,
one. Everybody always
can't.
talks about like, if they have triggers or whatever, like that's the one thing I just refuse to read. Like I'm just not
Yeah, it
interested in
like
reading
makes
it,
me
and I'm
like
not going to.
really
Like,
sick when I
yeah.
read it. Like I can't do it. And I don't know if it's like a person, if it's like something in the back of my head. Like as far as I know, my husband's never cheated on me, but I don't know if it's like that feeling of just like that. Yeah, that is like the worst thing that for me in a book. I think I can like deal with anything else. Well, not anything else. I mean, there are other limits that I have, but yeah, that's like one of the things for me is, so like it definitely depends on like how the angst is comes.
Mhm.
So
I don't mind angsty reads, but need for them, I need for the angst to come from like the something that's very like intrinsic to the story. If I feel like even a little bit like the author is like manipulating the situation to make it, then I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
manipulating
It's like
everything.
the same
Everything.
No,
with-
I know, but I don't want to feel that.
Well,
Like
that's
from
like
the beginning, like I
stop
think
watching Grey's Anatomy. I'm like, I don't like to be emotionally tortured for the sake of fiction. I'm just not here for it anymore. And that's how I feel sometimes with some of the books that I hear about, and I'm like, there's no way that's for me.
well, like with Maddek and Yvenne, there was from the beginning, you knew like as soon as that setup happened, like as soon as they were like, yep, we'll get married and it'll be fine. We'll hate each other forever, but it's okay. You knew, I mean, like from the beginning, you were like, oh, this is gonna be problems. But
actually, that's true. Like I love like angst that comes from like longing, especially, or like sometimes like misunderstandings, to as long as, yeah, like you said, I think that's where the manipulation comes in. When like I see every once in a while somebody mentioning that they don't talk to each other, for example. And I totally agree with that. I think it's very frustrating in a romance when it's just like, if you guys would just talk to each other once, all of this is like taken care of, right? And so I did know that when he did that vow, when he was like, you can't say what this is, if she could just tell him, maybe it would be taken away. But on the other hand, would he have believed her is the other question too. So there is that journey where he has to learn to believe what she says and to believe in her and to trust her, because she might have spoken the truth at the beginning. In fact, she did speak the truth at the beginning, and he didn't believe her. So then he said, don't talk to me about this. And so they didn't talk about it for a long time. And so I definitely see why, that can be frustrating for a reader, because you see how it can be fixed, but whatever is in their characters is like stopping it from being fixed. And sometimes that's, that's frustrating sometimes. And it really is hard to pull off.
But I think he did pull it off, because it made perfect sense why he would not trust her and why he couldn't believe her. And in fact, that made it all the more heart-wrenching for us as readers at the end, when she's like, it's fine. Like, we're good. Like, you can go do this and I'm just going to go home alone. And he's like, wait, what? And she's like, no, because, you know, you're never gonna, you obviously don't trust me now. Everybody thinks I'm a liar. Like, no, that's it. And he's finally dawns on him that he has totally mucked up the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I loved that he got to the point where he was like, when I get back from this war, we were going to talk and I will believe you. Like, it wasn't, and there wasn't, he had to get to the point where he trusted her then, because it was like, okay, I know you don't have any proof. I know that there's, but I'll believe you, whatever you tell me. Which is such a journey from her like telling him exactly the truth of what happened. And he's like, I can't, like, there's no way for me to believe you. Like, you couldn't prove it to me in a way that I could believe you.
Right. Which I think it's important too, is at the beginning, you know, when you have two characters who are not communicating but you can kind of see why. It's not that one person is totally unreasonable. You can kind of see why he's not going to trust her, right? I mean, I mean, who could really blame him? And in fact, you know, the people around him don't really blame him either. It's just that he's so stubborn, and it just kind of goes on. And he made this vow, and he just screwed himself over, because he could have like learned the truth, you know, before that. But yeah, again, he might not have trusted that truth before that. So I think it is important, like when you're reading those romances where you have those misunderstandings, or you have those people who don't communicate, to have really good reasons why they don't communicate and don't trust each other.
I read this was a historical romance from Grace Calloway, and it's called like I can't remember the lady who came in from the cold or something like that. It is a marriage and trouble story. And in the books before this one, you find out that this lady was like a spy, and part of her I guess reward for a job well done was that she came back to England and was like given kind of a new identity. So she was introduced to society as like the daughter or the niece of some people, and so she gets married. It's a love match. And, you know, years and years later, this man finds out that his wife is
almost like a witness protection type of thing. Like,
kind of. Yeah. But then it's like, oh, you were a what? You were in the war. You were a spy. You were in my camp. Do you know what I mean? It's like he was just kind of like, and he is like, okay, I can't handle this. And the whole thing is them trying to, I mean, she like kidnaps him because they have to talk. Yeah, but it's
Mr. and Mrs. Smith. What was that
movie,
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, where they both
they're both spies and they both knew it, but they didn't bring it up until they didn't have a choice. Yeah.
No, but this one was, I mean, for me, that was like, it was angsty, but I could see, I was like, okay, so she wasn't going to tell him because she couldn't. And then once they were married, it's like, well,
at what point do you say this? Yeah.
So it was like that kind of stuff. I'm good. And I actually really like that book a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I really do like, I like Friends to Enemies to Lovers a lot.
Oh yeah.
I like Marriage and Trouble a lot. I like forbidden love kind of stories. I also really like instructional kissing. Like any time where it's like, I will teach you how to do this, but it's not going to be a thing. We're just
to help you,
just for educational purposes.
You must be like reading Ruby Dixon like crazy then, because like every single one is like, I'm gonna teach this alien how to kiss.
Okay, so my very favorite scene in a Ruby Dixon book was the one, oh shoot, and I can't remember which book it is now, but there's one where one of those Earth girls tells this poor pining alien that on Earth, if you like gift a representation of your penis.
That was one of the early ones too.
Yeah, I think
Yes, I was
book
like,
3 or something.
why would you do this?
Because it was Kira. She's not the one who said it, but she's the one who received the gift and was like,
Yes.
what is this?
He's like whittled. He's like, it's just
So
right.
good.
Anyway.
Awesome. I love it. My favorite trope is brother's best friend. So I'm down for some longing because that pretty much always involves some level of unrequited love. So
Right.
so yeah, I'm always down for that. But it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know what it is, but I'll know it when I see it as to whether or not it's something I can handle, I guess.
I think the brother's best friend sometimes has the instructional kissing, and that's
Oh,
a good.
for sure.
Oh yeah.
Definitely. Because yeah, there's more than one I've read where it's like, oh, I'll just ask him to teach me these things. Like he clearly knows how to do these things. Like, I can trust him. Right. And so yeah, it's great. I love it. So
I guess I should ask you my evergreen question, which is if we were a fly on the wall, when you're deep in your writing process, what would we see?
You would see me like lying on my bed staring up at the ceiling.
Oh.
Because like that's one of the ways that I I go through the scenes in my head like over and over and over again. And it's not like a movie exactly because it's a weird thing. I like see the words that I'm gonna write like a ticker tape, and then I like go back and I edit them and like work out the sentences that way. But yeah, to like really get the feel of the scenes and to like work through how it's going to be like have the emotional punch that I want and the narrative punch that I want. It's like a refining process. And so like if I'm in bed making myself cry, I'm like, that's gonna go on the page, really. I mean, or like if I'm like making myself.
Do you remember it after that? I will say this because
I'll have my phone next to me and then I'll text myself or I'll like email myself whatever the scene is or whatever the line is or whatever the idea is. And so yeah, a lot of time like at night I'll do that too, is that before I fall asleep I'll like kind of work through what the next scene needs to be and how I'm going to really make it have as much like narrative punch as possible.
I'm gonna tell. I was just watching it's a course about sleep, and one of the things they said is that in your REM sleep, which is where you have your dreams, that you'd work out problems, and that they did some testing with people where they like had them try to solve a problem while they were awake, obviously. Then they go to sleep, and as soon as they wake up, they have them try to solve the problem. And they said people when they just woke up from sleep would solve it in like the most creative and unique and interesting ways, because apparently while you're sleeping, your brain like will try out all these different connections and see how things fit together and kind of, but it's not your conscious brain that thinks it knows things. It's like your subconscious that fiddles around with things. I was like, maybe you're using your sleep to its optimal potential. That's where I was going with it.
I don't know like what the neurological thing is, but it definitely is like a run over and over and over again and then like tease out all the little possibilities. So it does kind of feel like, what are the connections that I can make between, from one sentence to the next or from one like one set of dialogue to the next. How am I gonna do that? So it does like run over and over again in my head. So it does have that feeling of like Groundhog Day. Go over and over and over it again until you get the right one that'll let you out and like live again. Oh, someday I'll live again.
Do we know yet if there's going to be any more books after book 3?
We don't know yet for sure. It's because so the date of release got moved to October 26th. I sent out a newsletter because I had, when I saw the date had changed, I was like, I sent an email to my editor and I was like, it's like, this isn't right, is it? She's like, no, it's, it's supposed to be June. And so I sent out my newsletter, but then they actually had moved it. And part of that reason is because this has been.
Oh, so it really is going to be October.
Yeah, so it is going to be October because I haven't, as soon as I turn it in, I think that they will, I'm like that far away from the end. So as soon as I turn it in, I suspect that I will know then if we're going to go back to contract or not. So.
Okay.
Hopefully we will know soon.
Well, if you write any more things, you can always send them our way. This world is always welcome over here by the book.
Yeah, it'll be hard to leave it because I did, I had the original trilogy in mind, and then I have another trilogy in mind for coming after that. But I did want it to be like I had an 8-book series when I first started out, and it was like, I did get to the end of it and I finished it up and I was really happy, but I was like, that's a long series for people to, kind of take in. So I was like, if I do it in 3 books, then if, it's like little pieces. And if somebody wants to come in on book 4, then they can. So that way they're like kind of separate story arcs that will.
So you're doing like in the same universe, but you can.
Yeah, so like it'll like move ahead in time a little bit and it'll move around the world a little bit more. And so we might see like some of the same characters. In fact, definitely would see some of the same characters, but they would be in different circumstances because it would be post what happens in book 3. I'm trying not to like do spoilers or whatever, but yeah.
Okay. And then I guess my other question really is like, are there any secondary characters that you'd really like to spend more time with, or are the characters, if you do go on, are the main characters just brand new people, or are there any people that you're going to be revisiting?
No, there's some people will be like I won't like revisit the main couples. I mean, we might see them again, but there are secondary characters that I would put into books 4, 5, and 6, and we definitely see a couple of those characters in book 3.
Okay.
You're being very good, and I really, I'm like, tell me some names.
I've got so much planned.
Oh,
so exciting. Oh, I really hope we get to see it, and I can't wait for book 3. Holy cow. I am like, ready to go.
I'm like, I love this book so much, and it's actually like the first one that I like thought of all those years ago. So, but it was just that I realized that the story was way too big to have as the first book, so it needed to be the 3rd book. So.
That's awesome. Exciting.
So you thought up the end of the series before the beginning. That's interesting too.
Yeah, like A Heart of Blood and Ashes, it was never even supposed to be a novel. It was supposed to be a novella. Like I thought, it'd be like 45,000 words, maybe like 200 pages.
I mean, that's even The Beast of Blackmore is better than that, isn't it?
That didn't work out quite the way I thought. but it was funny because it was 2010 when I first sketched out those books, and then book 2, A Touch of Stone and Snow, some of that idea was from a book 2 that I had already planned, but I did change it up quite a bit. And you kind of notice that in the novella for Beast of Blackmore, it's Lena's cousin Malla who's the heroine, and that's because Lena, who is the heroine of book 3, that was kind of like in my head as the first book then. And so when I wrote A Heart of Blood and Ashes, it was just going to be like a kind of a standalone novella, and then it ended up being a much bigger book. And so I was like, well, I need to make this book number 1 instead. And so I brought in a lot of that whole, the destroyer is coming back, we need to build up to book 3. So I mean, it was like kind of a weird way to go about structuring a trilogy, but I think it turned out a lot better than what my original idea was.
Well, and of course we read Heart of Blood and Ashes, so that's mostly what we focused on, but A Touch of Stone and Snow was so amazing too. And even though it feels like a totally different feel to the book than it was to book 1, even though it's obviously still in the same world, but it's just as good. Like even though it
Together.
made you feel like a whole different way while you were reading it, and it was still just as good. Like I loved it so much. And Cabe is the coolest pet ever. I love him. Yeah.
Like, how
If you read A Heart of Blood and Ashes with us and you liked it, then definitely go read book 2 because it's also amazing.
Yeah, I think it is different. I mean, you have like a hero who's not the rage monster jerk that Maddek is for so long. He's much sweeter. You know, they have a history, and so it is like a friends to enemies to lovers type of story. And so there's a lot of that, you know, angst, and but it's another book where it has kind of a slow build up at the beginning. I mean, I think it's like 20,000 words in, even before they even like are on the same page together, even though the whole time they're like longing for each other. So I mean, it does still have that kind of like, you know, slow build to introduce the world and everything before they really take off. And
it feels like a bit of like a reverse Grumpy Sunshine too, because she's definitely the grump in that scenario, and he's much more sunshiny. Even, you know, when you find out about the past and, you know, what she thinks he's done to her and stuff, he's still just like a soft boy. I love him.
Yeah, and you know, that was something I didn't plan at all, because in the original one, it was that there was going to be like no history like that between him, except that she was going to be in love with him, but he was going to hate her because he thought that whatever happened, you know, he thought that what had driven her away was actually like her fault. And so he was going to be like much, much meaner. And then I started writing that book, and I was like, this is not working at all. I was like, she's going through so much. She needs somebody who's
supportive and
sweet and supportive. I was like,
I remember we posted that picture of the cartoon dragon, and I was like, after Maddek, we need a cartoon dragon, so it's okay.
Yeah, book 3 is not a cartoon dragon. Although the cartoon dragon is in there. Oh, Eric, he's so cute.
That's awesome. We were so glad to have you, and we were so thrilled to read this book again. And we hope everybody out there loved it as much as we do.
Well, yeah, I'm really glad that you guys. I'm glad it held up on a reread. I think that's always like the hard thing, you know, when you're like, okay, I've read this, and it's like, is it going to be as exciting the second time, or as good the second time? And so that's always like, yes,
yeah,
I'm so glad. And yeah, for everybody. Also, if you haven't read it yet, anybody. I know that sometimes it's like hard to get into the first chapters. And I have heard that if you're struggling, maybe skip to chapter 3. And
yes, Jen from Fated Mates suggested that, because she fossils, as she calls it, all of her when you can't get into like a fantasy story in the world building and you just need to like jump onto the page, that's a good place to start. But I mean, I could never do that personally, but I'm glad that works for some people.
I always feel like I need to say there's like maps on my site too, because especially with fantasy, I think orienting like where everything is happening mentally and visually helps too. So, and the map's not in the book, but there is one on my site. So if you are kind of struggling, like, what does this world look like? That's a good way to. I just realized my pig is like, hi pig.
Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman pig. She's looking over my shoulder.
So, and I guess if you want to tell everyone where they can find you on the interwebs.
Millavane.com, and Twitter is @Millavane, and then Instagram and Facebook are like author Milla Vane, I think.
Yes, it's author Milla Vane for Instagram.
And when everybody's watching this on Saturday, you can find her at Romance by the Book. She'll be taking over our page.
And the link to your website will be in the link in our bio. So
and the recommendations that she has on her own TBR pile for when she finds this book.
I think that's my TBR pile. I can't remember what I put on there. Yeah, it's been not a reading winter at all. So it's more like not what I have to recommend, but like what I'm really dying to read, or what's looked really good.
Do you find that when you're writing you don't read as much, or are you somebody who reads?
No, well, I mean, I'm a binge reader, so like if I pick up a book I have to finish the entire thing, but it's definitely been like, because I am late with a book and kind of on deadline, I feel guilty when I read, so I try not to. But also it's just like, you know, daughter's school stuff at home and just other stuff going on. It's been a bad winter.
This year hasn't been very good for people, like as far as keeping to their your normal schedules and their normal. I feel like I didn't concentrate very well for a while, so I was like, well, maybe I'll listen to this on audio, or maybe there were a few things that I started and I'm like, normally I know I would like this, but I can't do it right now. So
yeah, I think that's true of a lot of things that I've like I've been sneaking in like novellas here and there, like short reads, like Jessica Kane, you know, that kind of thing where you can read it in like half an hour, 45 minutes, and it's like short, hot, and you're like done, you know, and you don't have to.
And then you feel like you finished a book, and and it makes you happy again too. Yeah.
And you get that little nice emotional adrenaline rush, sexy adrenaline rush, and the story, and you know, I love it like when books really kind of like sink into the trope, and so like when you get that nice little just punch of a trope and then you're done, it's nice because then you do feel like you've like had the full course meal even though you've only had that little bit.
Yeah.
So
we're all about the banana pants reads over here, so yeah.
Oh yeah. Those are completely banana pants, right? Oh my god,
they are. They're amazing. I love them. They're
I thought I liked bananas, but I think I was more aware of bananas like old school, of really like crazy alpha heroes and like premises that are like, okay, sure, I'll go with it. But Megan has introduced me to some different kinds of bananas. It's true. We like read this and I'm like, oh, okay. Not my historical bananas. It's a whole other thing. Although I did find Ruby Dixon on my own and her like whittled penis.
Yeah, those books are great. I love those. They're just like, and there's something about the just light humor of everything, you know, where like they do have so many like just like kind of like depressing or like, you know, serious topics they deal with, and yet it's like
really fun.
Yeah, it's just so fun to read and to immerse
in
their world.
I do like when books can, I don't know if poke fun at themselves, but when they acknowledge the bits that are there's some books you're reading and you're like, this is odd, and then the character will say like, yeah, this is odd, and you're like, it is, you know, like I do like it when a book acknowledges.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that Ruby Dixon does that pretty well. Like even in the first ones, you know, they were like the cooey, I don't know, and you know, and they were having that reaction too. So it was like, okay, I feel better about this. They are aware.
Yeah, I think that's what you get with like the Earth Girls, especially, is because like they are just like normal people in this crazy situation, and they say this is a crazy situation, but we're gonna go with it. That's I guess that's the best you can do is when you have a book like that.
Once they accept that they aren't gonna be able to get home, then it's like, okay, so how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna live here? How are we gonna go on? And then they figure it out. But yeah, it's that series is great. I can't remember even how I started reading the first one, but once I did, it was just like, forget it. I can't remember how many were out when I first started, but at least 8, and now it's like 18 or something. I've read all of them.
She is crazy productive. It's like one of those things that I get so jealous of, like watching like book after book, and they're like consistently good. I mean, of course, you know, there's some that are better than others, but
they're fun reads.
Yeah, I'm like when I see somebody come out and write that well all the time, I'm just like, oh,
you're like, how do you do it?
Oh, but yeah, it's fun.
Well, we are very excited for book 3. We can't wait to read it. And
maybe another series. Who do we call?
I know, right?
Make this happen.
Buy the books, and hopefully there will be more.
That's how it works. But I mean, honestly, I wasn't really sure how these books would be like received, because I knew especially the first one is going to be just like going right up to that line for some people. And so I am just kind of overwhelmed by, your reaction and so many people enjoying them, because I really thought I have ruined my career. But
You thought
people
that?
have been talking about them, and I'm just like, yes, everybody enjoys this as much as I do. So I mean, I love reading them, so it's always good to hear. I mean, I love like writing them, because that's my whole thing. I write the stuff I want to read, and so it kind of blows my mind that anybody else wants to read it too. And not only that, but like has a lot of fun with it. So I'm like, yes.
Come for the bloody hand job, stay for the alpha male maturing into a responsible king.
It's true. Actually, you know what's funny is I heard so much people were like, that hand job. And I was kind of like, I don't know. That seemed like it worked for like it didn't, I don't know. I guess the heads were more of a thing for me. I was like, these are very interesting presents these two give each other.
Here's your brother's head. Let's have sex for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much.
We joked about it actually in the last week's video, where she like tossed her brother's head off the side of the boat and describes it like bobbing away. And I was like, oh my God.
That's the stuff that gets me. I'm like, oh.
But it's so her. Like, of course, she wants to watch his head float away because she hates his guts. He was a monster. Yeah, but it was amazing.
It's just so fun to write, you guys.
Believe it.
It was fun to read. And I was like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, wow, she did that. She really did.
And it worked.
Also, when they were
bloody hand jobs.
When they were gonna do the Moon Knight, and Maddek is like, oh, by the way, and I'm like, why would you?
I'm like, no, stop talking.
I'm like, why don't you say the thing after?
After.
Like, don't ruin. She's like all showered and like. Anyway.
She's like ready to go, and
he was like, woohoo, this is great, I'm in the mood. And he's just like, let me just explain one thing to you first. I was like,
I have to say that scene too, the scene where they meet, was like the first one I thought of. The next one I thought of that I was like, I have to write, it's that one thrust and then he's done. And it was like the best thing.
And she's like, so you've broken all your pieces. Great, now get out.
Like I was like her insult.
So
I wrote that like so many years ago. I wrote it as its own separate scene. How she's gonna insult him, and it lasted because I was like, this is great. She's gonna like just completely emasculate him before he goes out. Oh, it was the best thing.
It was good. And then he goes out and his dragon is like, you need to shower. Like, don't bathe because you'll be sitting in your own filth. And I was like, I feel this. I am a person who showers before I take a bath because I'm like, no, I'm not. So yeah, you definitely like, I guess I might be a strange reader, but those were the things that I was like, oh, I feel seen.
But I think that's something people notice, and especially like when you're riding like a bunch of barbarians, they're sweaty, they're bloody, they're like, they've been on riding horses for days and days, they've been camping for days and days. And so I do have to be very like conscious of when do they take a bath, because when they're going down on each other, they need to have taken a bath at some point, right? Or else because even if you like don't mention it, it's in the reader's minds, because it would be in my mind. I'd be like, wait a second, like they've been riding horses all day and they're sweaty and they have not washed and he's just going to town. I'm like, no.
Like, no.
There's gonna be a stream somewhere. They're gonna wash. Oh, because
there's gonna be water in the palm of this.
Of a giant statue buried in the ground. Yeah.
Conveniently, it's warm. Perfect for
like a bath. Amazing. I love it.
You've got to, because you can't like the reader is going to be modern even if the setting is not.
It's
and so
true.
like, yeah, so I mean there's a lot of things like when I was writing the millipede leg, like she's like sucking the jelly out of it, and I'm like, is this gonna totally like gross out everybody? And I was like, maybe, probably. I was like, but they've got to take a bath. She can eat millipede legs, but the other part of it, that has to be
Yeah.
There's like some things you can't not do.
Her appetite was something that was also like super fun to read.
So fun. I love it. She was like attacking food everywhere she went. It was great.
Yeah.
Well, and Maddek was like, she really does enjoy this. I mean, it was really cute. I enjoyed that a lot.
I especially loved, yeah, when they got into the town, when they were headed for the boat, and like she's talking about how everything's on a stick and she can eat it on a horse, and it was so magical. It was so great.
Yeah, food on a stick is the best. I was probably like eating satay or something on that day, or like a corn dog maybe. I was like, food on a stick. It's like the weirdest things that you think of. Like, why, why would you even put that in a book? And I can't even it's like one of those things where I don't even know where it comes from. Sometimes it's like that you just like think, I have to have them doing something. So food on a stick, and it's a weird thing, but of course it comes from corn dogs and such. I bet it's my corn dog way of writing a book. It's all about corn dogs. Oh God!
I'll be looking for the corn dogs in other books.
Yes.
Especially I suppose like in a like a deeper metaphorical sense, like everything's phallical when it's on a stick, and so it was going to be their moon night, so of course she's eating everything off a stick. So yeah, that was my deeper meaning. I'm a deep meaning person.
Definitely.
Oh, and the cockmonger too.
Oh my God, that was the best.
How do you make it swell? I was like, oh.
I love it. She's like, oh, this one. And he's like, do you need to look again?
These little dragons like,
I was surprised that he like survived that whole like sequence, like where between the cockmonger and the one thrust with like any ego intact at all, because it was just Milla, and
she's
she's
to
like,
start with. That's awesome.
Oh, that was fun.
So much fun. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much again for coming, and we're excited for your takeover on Saturday, and we hope everybody enjoys hanging out with Milla, and thank you again so much.
Thank you. Bye everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good one.